Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Wright, and I am the city coordinator for the Boston-Cambridge chapter of Taste of Science. But I am also your host for our newest project, Peers and Pubs. What is Peers and Pubs, you ask? Well, scientists often have what they call journal clubs. They get together after reading a scientific article to discuss the research presented. Peers and Pubs is a way for any and all of you, our peers, to learn about some of the work that is written about in these publications. These are not usually accessible to those outside of science, so we'll be asking specialists in the field to explain one of these publications, and we'll be bringing you along for the ride. Before we get started, though, we'd like to share a few details about our event. We have a chat box open in both Zoom and Facebook, so come and say hey. Let us know who you are, where you are, and exactly how much you love sharks. If you're in Zoom, please leave any questions you want answered in the Q&A box, because we'll miss it if you put it in the chat. If you're on Facebook, we will have someone scouting for your questions, so go ahead and leave them in the chat there. I also want you to know about something we're calling jargon alert. Science can be hard to understand. If at any point during the presentation, myself or our guest Ren is confused about what Anabela says, we're going to hold up one of these signs so she can pause and help us out with some clarification. Why am I telling you this? Because you should feel free to let us know in the Q&A on Zoom or the chat on Facebook when you need a little bit more information too. We will also have some trivia later on to see what fun shark facts you've learned. So if you want to join us, we recommend you have a second device around, like a phone or a tablet to play. Before we dive in with sharks, let's get warmed up with one quick question. If you're on Zoom, go ahead and participate in this poll. What do you think of when you hear the word journal? Do you think of a diary? Do you think of nature and science sound a little bit familiar? Do you think, oh, stay back, reviewer too? Or do you think, search me on PubMed and pack a lunch? All right, we can see our answers coming in here. Let's get it up to 80%. There we go. All right, so it seems like, nature and science sound kind of familiar. That's great. So the next thing that we're gonna do is talk about a little bit of my experience with publishing. So for me, as a neuroscientist, a scientific journal is a publication sharing the results of new or reviewing the current state of a topic. Some of the big ones I interact with are nature and science, so some of the ones that you're familiar with. Although I haven't published there, some of my work has been published in other scientific journals. In addition to learning about one scientific paper during each session of Peers and Pubs, we hope you walk away from this series with a better understanding of the scientific publication process, which is why we asked this question. To jumpstart this goal, we've prepared a 5-minute video that I'm going to play for you right now.
What even is science? Sure, it can be the dictionary definition, but why limit yourself? Science ranges from the study of cells, to researching human populations, to studying the stars. From micro to macro, it's a lot of things. Importantly, science is shared through publications, often written by teams of scientists. Here's where the pubs comes in. The point of writing up our experiments and observations is to publish. You see, it's really important that work is shared between specialists in their field, or nothing advances, and your tax dollars are wasted. Now, you might think the writing phase is the hard, most tedious part. But actually, the difficulties come once your paper is submitted to a scientific journal. Submitting your science to a journal often turns into rounds and rounds of editing, and it all starts with the journal editor. The next round of editing comes from our peers, which are called reviewers in this context. But really, they're just scientists in the same field who can critically evaluate your work. They suggest revisions to make sure your publication's methods are sound and your paper contributes something meaningful to the field. This is like when teachers asked you to share your paper with someone else in class for their commentary. Now, if you don't get grumpy reviewer number 2, your paper might just be ready to submit with minimal revisions. But sometimes redos happen. You see, we also make mistakes or overlook things. Revisions might involve doing more experiments, analyzing the data a bit differently, or adding information that might have been missing from the start. This is why we say science is so sound, in theory at least, before anything is published. It is really put through the ringer. So, what happens next? Accepted. We wish. Publishing science is not straightforward. Take the prestigious Journal of the American Medical Association, for example. Only 4% of 5,300 research papers are accepted annually. So, if rejected, hours and days and sometimes years of planning, research, writing, and revisions may need to be redirected to another journal, where the whole procedure starts again. Really, it's not our brains scientists should be appreciated for, but our patience. But the system is in place for a reason: to be the gatekeeper of bad science. When peer review fails, research like Andrew Wakefield's Vaccines Cause Autism paper can take hold and have a long-lasting societal impact. Papers can be retracted for flawed science, but it is really, really, really important that we keep those ones outside of the gate. So, where does peers and pubs fit into all of this? We believe in making science accessible, not just for our colleagues, but for you too. Peers and Pubs is a journal club designed to create a conversation between specialists and non-specialists. We discuss a scientific article together and talk about how science is published and shared. So, join us to become more involved in the scientific process.
All right, everyone. For those of you less familiar with the big names of nature and science, I hope you feel a little bit more acquainted with the scientific publishing process now. All right, enough with the extras and on to the main event. Please let me introduce you to our scientist and presenter for the day, Dr. Anabela Maia. She is a marine biologist at Rhode Island College who studies how fish swim. She loves sailing, swimming, and hiking in her spare time. And she's originally from Portugal, but fell in love with New England. She's joined by her friend Ren Whitaker, our guest today, who is a freelance learning designer and fledgling children's book writer and illustrator. Ren is into positivity, curiosity, and inclusion. Everyone, please welcome Anabela and Ren.
Hello.
So, tell us how you got to know each other. Absolutely. Tell us how you guys got to know each other.
You want to hear our friendship story? That's great.
I
Shall I
do.
tell it, or you, Anabela? And by the way,
Go for it.
It's so exciting to be a part of Taste of Science and Peers and Pubs. This is so great. So what do you say? Should I tell the story of how we met?
Go for it.
All right, I'm going to do it. Oh my gosh, do you have a shark too? How did you know I was going to bring my shark? That's amazing. That is so funny. Good for you.
I didn't get the memo.
I hope everyone brought their shark. I hope everybody did. Anyway, Christina, thanks for that great introduction. Let's just jump right in. Anabela. So Anabela and I have a mutual friend named Erin. And Erin is a collector of sorts, but she doesn't collect stamps and she doesn't collect postcards. She collects people. And not just any kind of people. She loves meeting people from all over the world. She has friends from Germany, from China, from Syria, from Iran, and Portugal, if you know where I'm going with this. So one day I was at a barbecue at Erin's house, chomping on a veggie burger. And Erin came over to me and said, you see that woman with the glasses and the curly hair? You have to meet her. Her name is Anabela. She's super smart. She's super cool. And she's a shark expert. The second I heard that, I pole vaulted over to Anabela, and before we knew it, we were good friends, right? Is that a good way to tell that story?
Yes, that's definitely a great way to tell it.
About 10 years ago? I don't know.
Yes.
10 years?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Incredible. Oh, well.
So I love it. It's so great. So great. That's an adorable way to meet. I'm so glad you two are friends, and I'm so glad that we have both of you here today. Now, I'm going to ask Ren another question. How much do you know about sharks and scientific publishing? Where are you in this space right now? How are you feeling?
The answer on a scale from 1 to 5 would be a 2, especially surrounded by people like Anabela and other folks who I'm sure are out there today who know a lot more about sharks than I do. A 2, most of my knowledge comes from the movie Jaws. So there you go. Publishing, I, just for funskies, tried to decipher the very dense and super smarty pants paper that Anabela published. Nope, not happening. Nope, not gonna happen.
We're here to help you.
I know, I'm so excited today because I'm finally gonna understand what the heck she really is studying.
Absolutely. That is why we're here. Thank you for being so candid. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are watching this that feel exactly the way you do right now. And I do science, but I certainly don't do shark science. So I am largely in the same boat here.
Cool.
All right. Everybody at home, I want to remind you before we get started that we want to make sure that you leave your questions or your jargon alerts in the Q&A box on Zoom or the Facebook chat box. And if you do that, then we'll get Anabela to answer them later on in the presentation. All right, so Anabela and Ren, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's learn about some fantastic shark science.
Cool. Sounds really fun. Sounds really fun. By the way, one more thing, Anabela, I just wanted you to notice that I wore my octopus earrings tonight. I don't have shark earrings. You probably. Are you wearing sharks?
Shark earrings, yes.
Oh. Of course, I should have known. But that's in honor of you. And I think at this point, you want to just dive in?
Sure. So today, the paper that I wanted to talk to you about, I think it has some cool factor. It's about sharks, and we actually use sharks and lasers, to actually look at how the fins work. So the title might be a little overwhelming at first: hydrodynamic function of dorsal fins in spiny dogfish and bamboo sharks during steady swimming. But basically, this paper is going to tell us about how these two species of sharks use their fins to swim, their dorsal fins specifically. And I just wanted to say that this is a collaborative effort, like the majority of research. So this work would not have been possible without my collaborators, Dr. George Lauder at Harvard University, and Dr. Cheryl Wilga at University of Rhode Island. So a big shout out to them too. So Ren, how much do you know about fish swimming and shark swimming in general and specific?
Ooh, in general, I know that they swim. Okay, so I feel like I got that down. I hope I'm not wrong about that. They swim. I know that they have fins that probably helps them to swim. Other than that, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Do you know the names of the fins of sharks? Do you know what all the fins are called? So this one's here, they're called the pectoral fins.
Okay.
Maybe you know the name of this one because it's always in the news.
Dorsal?
The dorsal fin. Then we have the caudal fin or the tail.
Okay.
And then we have the pelvic fins that in sharks are actually specialized. They're going to be, in the male sharks are going to be the copulatory organs, so the claspers, so the penises of the sharks, okay? So male sharks will be we'll be able to tell them apart from females based on this pelvic fins. And then we also have the anal fins. This shark, this blush shark does not have an anal fin, but you can see here, I have another one that's a little more scientifically accurate that has a little tiny little anal fin here and a second dorsal fin. And you were right, like fish use all these fins to swim. So sometimes they can be used as propulsion, sometimes they can be used for stability. And so that's what we call the partition of the work throughout the fins. So basically, all these fins will have a function, and those functions are going to vary by species. For example, here, this bluegill might not swim the same way as a shark, right?
Right. And first of all, you know, when I think of a goldfish cracker, you know, you got yourself your nice, what is it, caudal fin? That's the fancy name? I usually eat those first. I don't know about other people, but biting off the tail. Anyway, that's probably not, you know, relevant right now. But look at how many fins there are. Look, let's count together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different fins on one little old fish. I had no idea. So there you go. Do you feel better, Christina? Do you feel like you're already learning?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of fins going on.
I have a question about what we see on this slide. The first little arrow, it says most fish use swimming as their primary mode of locomotion. But is there another mode that they use? I'm just curious.
Yes, so it depends on the fish, but you might have some fish that might use gliding. So flying fish will actually jump out of the water and flare up their pectoral fins to glide and parachute themselves so they can actually hover over the water for a little bit. Then you have mud skippers or other fish that live in the mud flats that will use their pectoral fins, or the bamboo sharks, they'll use their pectoral fins to walk on the substrate. So there's actually a lot of other ways, other locomotion that's not necessarily swimming, but majority of sharks will be using locomotion just like the majority of other fish. Mm-hmm.
Well, when you say all that, it's like, oh, right, of course, flying fish and mud skippers, but I didn't really. That's awesome. Well,
if sharks could fly, that would be pretty terrifying.
You know, I mean, they can certainly jump out of the water. If you've ever seen a tiger shark attacking like a seal, for example, they'll jump out of the water. So, you know,
I think
like
I've seen anyone enough in my lifetime.
That's pretty cool.
So shall we dive into the methods of this paper?
I say yay. Let's go for it.
All right.
Absolutely.
So, as we do that, let's meet the 2 species of sharks that we used in this work. So maybe you might be familiar with the spiny dogfish. Spiny dogfish are fish off the coast of New England. They have these little spines in the front of the fins, the 2 dorsal fins, the first and the second dorsal fin, that gives it their name. And they might have some dots. And you can see here in this picture, they are what we call bentopelagic. So that means that they actually live in the middle of the water column, but they get their food from the ground.
Okay.
While bamboo sharks, they don't have much of bamboo except for they have these bands, right? And so it's actually what gives it the name. The white-spotted bamboo shark, because of all these white spots, is native of the Indo-Pacific region, and it lives in sandy and rocky and reef bottoms. So basically, you'd find it like along like those shores. But you probably seen them in aquaria because bamboo sharks are very hardy, and so they're actually kept in aquaria all over the world. So actually, we got some of our sharks from SeaWorld in San Diego.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, did they do tricks? Did they do any tricks?
No, not really. We went them wild. Go for it, Christina. You have a question.
Okay, so I see a little bit of a problem here in that the first one I totally buy is a shark, but that other thing does not look like a shark at all. What makes it a shark?
That's a really good question, Christina. So bamboo sharks actually are a little more adapted to their environment. So they actually have this more derived shape that looks a little, they're trying to mimic their environment. And so they don't necessarily look like your typical shark. And they also spend a lot of time on the bottom. So they might not need all the structures that all the torpedo-shaped body that a lot of the other sharks will. But they still have their 5 gill slits. So 5 to 7 gill slits is a characteristic of sharks. They also have a cartilaginous skeleton. So that means that they have no bones. They only have cartilage. They have a ventral mouth, and that ventral mouth will have teeth that get replaced throughout life, okay? They also have special little scales on their body called placoid scales that maybe you've heard it, that we looked into biomimicry or like building those scales in the lab, so you can actually increase, like reduce the drag, for example, in the shark suits for swimming that have been banned because they might not be equitable to everyone to wear them. Does that answer your question, Christina?
Yes, it does. And at this point, I am fairly convinced that I am not a shark. Not have 5 gill slits, 5 to 7 gill slits. I am missing some fins, etc., etc. All right. Okay, I'm good.
All right, should we go through the experimental setup?
I have one quick question.
Go.
Does it hurt to pet a spiny dogfish? You know?
Yes, that's a really interesting question. So you see the spines here?
Yeah.
The spines actually are defensive. And so fishermen, when they're actually catching them, they actually snip the spines so that they don't hurt themselves on the deck. Also, if you ever get your hand over a shark, in one direction it's actually very smooth, but in the other direction it's very rough. So shark's skin has actually been used as sandpaper in the earlier days. So.
Whoa.
Now, did you say rough on purpose? Rough, spiny dog.
No, did not.
Okay, I'm satisfied. I love this slide. There's a lot going on, but there's great information. Christina, how about you? You feeling good? Should we move on?
Feeling good.
Okay.
I think we can do it. I feel like we can do it.
Team.
So think of yourself like training, and especially running in this middle of this pandemic, you might be using a treadmill. So we use a similar structure to a treadmill, a flow tank. Okay, so basically we cannot put the shark on a treadmill, but we can put them in a flow tank where the water will come at a certain speed to the shark, and the shark will keep swimming in place. Okay, so think of it, a flow tank, as a treadmill for sharks or for other fish. So here you have the shark, and you have a drawing here, and the flow tank, and you have the flow coming. It's always going to be coming from your left in the subsequent figures for you to orient yourself. And then we actually are shining lasers at this shark. Don't worry, they're not being hurt. This is like a very thin sheet of laser that has gone through the water. And the purpose of that is to illuminate these little particles that we put in the water. And those particles are going to allow us to see what's happening to the flow of water behind the shark fins, okay? So how do we get from those particles with a camera? So we're actually recording in high speed from above the shark. And what we do is that, well, we don't do it. It's a computer program that does it, because we would be having to painstakingly track each little particle. So the computer vision program is actually looking at 2 sequential images. So one image at time 0 and one image at time 1. And it's actually going to create a little vector. So you can see that these particles are moving upwards, okay? So this vector is the direction and the intensity of the flow. So how long it is, it's going to be the intensity, and the arrowhead is going to tell you where it's going, okay? And so we can actually get a velocity field. So basically you can actually see that the flow is being accelerated, and it's in general going into this corner. And we can also look at vorticity. So vorticity, Ren, what happens when you unplug the bathtub?
When I unplug the what? The bathtub?
The bathtub, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know this one. The water goes round and round down the drain.
Yeah, so that swirliness is what we call vortices or vorticity. So it's actually a measure of how much like whirlpooling there exists in the image, okay? This is important because as we push on the water, we create turbulence, and that turbulence can actually propel the fish forward, okay?
Okay. So vorticity is like swirliness? Is that?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
that's okay. That helps.
All right, so we're going to be looking at these two fins, right? The first dorsal fin and the second dorsal fin. And we're actually going to be looking at the, this have the same colors throughout the talk. So the first fin is going to be red and the second fin is going to be blue to orient you. So I wanted you first to see a video. So Ren, I'm going to, and Christina, you can chime in too. We're going to look at a video of, this is a spiny dogfish in the float tank. The water, as I told you, is coming from this side, okay? And I have an outline here of the spiny dogfish, but this outline will actually disappear once I actually play the video. But you can kind of squint, if you squint, you can kind of see the shark in the background. There's going to be an image here so that if you forget what you're looking at, this is the whole animal here, so you can actually see the orientation. And because we're shining the laser through here, we can see that there's these two shadows. That's when the laser hits the fin, and then behind it, there's nothing. There's like just a shadow because the laser cannot go through, okay? So that will help you orient yourself because you can always see that when we're intersecting the fins, we'll have a shadow, okay?
Got it.
So the other thing I want you to look is that I want you to focus on the areas behind the fins, so here and here, and I want you to look for swirliness, and like if you see that the water is increasing in velocity, okay, in speeds.
Okay.
So squint hard.
You ready, Christina? I'm squinting
The
so
video,
I'm still ready. I'm still ready.
the video will loop, so you'll play a few times. So if you have, if you're home watching it, like, you know, just if you missed it, just keep looking. And again, you want to look behind the fins.
Fins, behind the shadows, right?
Exactly. And I'll give it a second, but then I'm going to deploy a poll for you to see at home to actually answer what you think is actually happening behind these fins. But let me pull up the poll. So
a poll. Ooh, fun.
And if the poll is in front of your video, you can actually move it, drag it in your Zoom so that it doesn't go through your video, so you can look at the video while you answer. So basically, we're looking to see if the what's the function of these fins in the spiny dogfish. So are these two fins both propelling and accelerating the water like paddles, or are they actually stabilizing the shark like a keel of a sailboat? Or is one doing one thing and the other one doing the other, okay? So think about that. No one's getting points here, don't worry. This is just for me to explain it better to you. I want you to squint hard at those vortices, those swirls, and see if you know what's happening. Okay. Ren, what do you think is happening?
Golly gee, well, now I know why I'm not a shark expert, because my eyes aren't as finely tuned as yours or trained, but I'm gonna try. I'm kind of focused on that second fin. I hope you don't mind that's
Sure.
The one that catches my eye. That seems to be swirly, like maybe it's churning a little.
Is the water being pushed?
I feel like the water is being pushed. Is that right? I could be wrong. Again, I'm highly trained as yours.
What about you, Christina, while you wait for 80% of the votes to come in?
Well, this is awkward because I thought that the swirly stuff was behind the front fin.
What if I tell you that you are both right? Okay.
Well, I like that answer.
Let me share you the results. So far, some people, the majority of you, think that the first dorsal fin is stabilizing the fish, while the second one is propelling it. We'll see if that's right in the next slide. But before I do that, yes, there's actually swirliness behind the first dorsal fin and behind the second. But there's more flow, there's faster flow behind this one, okay? So what does that mean? All right, I'm gonna take the poll away for a second, and we're gonna move on to the next slide, okay?
That was fun. Let's see.
So this is a little more sciencey. It was like, whoa, so many colors. How am I gonna do with this? They pull up my my laser pointer. So this is actually a time average. So basically we're over a certain time, the time that it takes for the shark to go like this. We're actually getting a snapshot of what's happening. And then we can actually compare that to the velocity as the in relation to the free flow, so the flow of the water away from the shark, okay? So basically when you have cooler colors, the blues, it means the flow is being decelerated, and the warmer colors means that the flow is being accelerated. So Ren, were you right? Was it pushing water with the second dorsal fin?
I think I was right, because it's red.
Yeah, it's red.
You know what? I'll get the next one.
No, Christina, you were right. You see here, there's actually swirl. But
I see the swirl.
Yeah, this swirl is actually slowing down. So this is the trademark of a stabilizing fin that would actually slow down the flow and instead allow the fish to not like roll, not like tip, okay? So it's actually slowing it down. But let's look. Yes, like a keel of a sailboat. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's look at it in another way. So we can actually zoom in on the, sorry, I should have showed you this before, but you can see here, if you zoom in, you can actually see the swirliness, how the water is being accelerated. And whenever you have like this, this red jets means that there's actually water being pushed out of that away from the shark. And if the shark is pushing in this direction, then the shark is moving in the other direction. Think of yourself as you're beating your feet in the swimming pool, right? You're propelling yourself forward. So certainly this fin is acting like a paddle. So let's look at what it looks like when we look at the velocity of the flow just in an area here behind each fin. And we're going to look at it in terms of how the, over time. So the shark fin is actually moving, and our unit of time, so it's like from one side to the other and back, okay? So we might think that as we go and push the water in one direction, we might have some drag. We might actually push the water, but then we might have to recover the fin. So not throughout the whole trial, we might not have as much thrust or force being produced. So let's look at this one here first. Let's look at the second dorsal fin first. So Ren, what do you think is happening here in terms of like the velocity of or the speed of the flow in comparison to the flow that is hitting the fin, which is this line here? Is it higher or lower?
Is my left-hand view of the dashed line, is that what you're referring to compared to the right side of the dashed line?
This is faster and this is slower. And the majority of these lines are on the faster side or on the slower side.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the water hits that fin, and that's the dashed line, right? That's the moment that it hits it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right?
That's
you're asking me what happened.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It seems like the line, there's more lines of the faster?
Yes. So here, this is actually the different lines mean actually different times. So basically we split the fin and we divide it into multiple slices over time. And each line, starting with the cooler colors, is a time point. So in the beginning, the fin is not really pushing much, but then it pushes and it creates all this acceleration, all this higher velocity than the incoming flow. Yes. So now that we got that out of the way with the easy one, what about this one? Is it accelerating or is it making it slower?
I mean, Christina, take a look, because I think you know the answer. I feel that you know the answer. And
you know what? I feel like I got a little bit of help here by having the first example go by first, but I'm gonna have to go with slower.
Yes, so basically all this line, so all over the time, the flow behind that fin is slower than the flow that reaches that fin. Yeah, there's a little bit here on the sides that's like basically like the pressure. As one fin moves to the other side, the water has to go somewhere, right? The water, it doesn't disappear. It has to find a way of escaping, okay? And so it seems to escape through here, okay? Cool. So now this is the spiny dogfish. Let's look at what happens with the bamboo shark. So again, here you have the bamboo shark, and I put a little outlines to orient you. This bamboo shark is going to come through, and it's going to, the flow is coming this direction, and this is the first dorsal fin. The second dorsal fin is going to come into view. And again, I'm going to play the video, and I'm going to ask you to figure out what's happening behind these fins.
Okay.
So I'll play it a couple of times, and then I'll pull up the poll. The questions of the poll are the same as before. There's a different species if you want to think about them right away.
Yep. So, okay, Christina, let's watch this together. There's the fin 1 is casting a shadow. There's fin 2. It's casting a shadow as well,
Oh,
right?
Sorry, good.
All right, so we got them both in view.
Oh boy. You know what? I'm really glad you're talking me through this, Ren.
If I kept talking,
it.
you'll get to say the answer, so I don't have to. Oh dear. Boy, Anabela, I mean, I'm glad you have glasses because this is precision work. You're really testing the old ovals here.
I think this one's harder than the last one. I'm just going to throw that out there. I feel like you're making this more difficult.
We'll rise to the challenge. We will rise to the challenge. Okay, let's focus. We got focus. There's that first fin, and I feel like there's swirl in the first fin.
There's definitely
I
swirl,
think I saw
right?
it.
Swirly.
I think I saw it.
But I feel like both of them are kind of swirly. I mean, maybe that's wrong. I don't know, but I'm going for it. If you're with me, Christine, now I'm going to cast our vote.
They are swirling, but are they pushing the water? Are they working as paddles, or are they working at keels? That's the question.
See,
right?
that's the problem. That's where I got tripped up last time because I saw the swirls and I went for it, and it was the slow swirl.
I feel like paddles. Paddles?
All right. You know
Well,
what?
we have 47%. I'll let you debate these a little bit more.
Oh my goodness.
They're like, oh yeah, paddles and keels, keels and paddles. I mean, let's look. I feel like
There's like an awful lot of movement at the end of that tail. Like some serious stuff is happening back there.
I'm thinking paddle. I'm thinking swirl. Maybe this time.
Well, we'll get to see that in a second. Let me end the poll and share the results. So the majority of you actually said that they're both stabilizing the fish and working like a keel of a sailboat. But think about it this way. Would a keel of a sailboat move? Would a keel of a sailboat be flexible? Is it good to have a flexible keel? Probably not, right? It's better to have a flexible paddle. I mean, at least when you're using your flippers, you can actually push on the water, right? Also,
if you had 2 keels, you wouldn't be able to go anywhere.
that's a good point too. You want your keel close to your center of mass, so the center where most of the distribution of the weight of the body is, so they can actually correct. So on the boat, the keel of a sailboat would be in the center too. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the results, and we're going to figure this out by looking at the next slide.
I hope it's yellow. Is it yellow? It's yellow. I knew we were going to get another one of these. Knew it.
So now, is there a lot of blue behind the fins?
No. It's in front of the fin, right?
Exactly. This is actually just an artifact. There's the nape of the shark is pretty elevated. So that means that they actually kind of cut the water a little bit. And so it slows down a bit with their heads. Just their neck slows down. They don't really have a true neck, but just behind their head, it slows down the flow a little bit. And that's what you see the blue here, okay? But we're interested in what's happening behind the fins. So right here and right here, there's a lot of red. And yes, of course, there's swirliness. You saw this with your eyes. And this is actually the jets that are going to create to propel the fish forward. So these 2 fins are certainly working like as paddles.
Yay!
And we can actually look at the same way that we did before, and we can see this in a different way. We can look at the velocity. So the velocity of these two fins in relation to the flow that hits the fin right before it, it's always going to be faster, right? So it's all to the right of the incoming flow that you see here with the dashed line. Is that making sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So now let's wrap this up and put it all into perspective. So showing you a busy slide with a lot of graphs, but this is like how, where the meat of a paper is in these graphs, right? That actually kind of summarize everything that's happening. I tried to like walk you through and break it down a little bit so you can figure out what you're seeing here. Remember, the first dorsal fin is red. The second dorsal fin is blue. I also want to walk you through the what these dots mean. So this larger dot is actually the mean. Then the little points in this case, they're crosses. In this case, they're open circles. They're actually the individual trials, so the individual experiments we ran. And then what you see here, the arrow bars or the whiskers are actually going to be the standard error, so how much variability you have around the mean, okay? So if we look at this, we can also look at, go ahead.
Yes. Say what? Say what? So just for the non-mathematicians, the mean is not the average, right? Or is it? Is it kind of like the average, but not really?
So mean is actually the mathematic term for average, okay? So we use average in our daily life, but you know, basically mean is you add all the points, you divide it by the number of the entries you had, and you have a mean, which is a mathematical term that determines what is the intermediate point of all your points, okay? So in layman's terms, you could equate mean and average.
Okay. So like 1 and 10, the middle is 5, like that.
It would be like 1, if you had 1 and 10, you'd add 1 and 10, you divide it by 2. So that would be actually 5.5 and not 5.
There you go again.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. So continue. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want
No, you're fine. So here you have a shark, and let's start by looking at how mass is important. We've talked about the vectors before, but you can actually decompose a vector into its normal components. So basically with the axis. And in this case, your velocity vector can actually be decomposed into a longitudinal vector that's giving you propulsion. Okay, so power up forward. And you can actually decompose it into lateral velocity, which is not necessarily great because it's kind of like lost energy. So we're going to call it lateral losses, okay? And then we have the vorticity, those vortices behind it, which is actually the swirl. We can, in layman's term, we can talk about swirl. So basically what you have here in your 3 graphs are the propulsion measurements, the lateral loss measurements, and the swirl measurements for the bamboo in green and the spiny in orange, okay? And then you have your first dorsal fin in red and your second dorsal fin in blue. And Ren, do you have any idea what these letters here stand for?
Apples and bananas.
Well, pretty much. I mean, to a certain degree, A is different from B, and that's really the role that they have there. They're playing a role to distinguish between groups that are significantly different. When we ran the statistical analysis, we're able to say that this dot is different from this dot, okay? But this dot is not different from this one or this one. So then we actually put an A and a B to tell that this one is actually not different from this one, but not different from this one. So it's in between. Does that make sense?
Can I take a stab at it? And that's
Sure.
Christina, you want and try to interpret that?
Go for it. Absolutely.
So, okay, so we're talking about 2 sharks. I know we got that lovely bamboo shark on the left, at least to the viewers, I think it's on their left. And then we have the lovely spiny dogfish on the right. Okay, great. Now, there's a first fin and there's a second fin on each one of those fish. Sorry, sharks. Oops,
They're
sorry
fish.
about that. Okay.
They're fish.
They're fish too? Oh, good. See, I learned something else. Just want to check that they're not species or something. Okay. I just embarrassed myself. That's okay. Okay, so that I kind of feel like the the first fin, and the second fin. So first fin on the bamboo shark and the second fin on the spiny dogfish, because they're both A's, they have something in common. Is that what you mean?
That's right. And
Okay.
they do, right? They both are propelling the fish forward.
They both are propelling the fish forward.
Yes, they have
because it's on the longitudinal velocity, which is
propulsion.
Okay, I'm getting there.
You had a question, Christina?
Oh no, I'm good. I was just very proud of Ren. That was incredible.
Gosh, I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I think I'm starting to get this. Hey, can we jump to swirl and do the same thing?
Sure.
All right. Because I'm a little less, I know lateral losses are like wasted energy, but I'm just going to go right to swirl because I like swirl. I feel comfortable with swirl. Okay, here we go. All right, swirl. So we got A, B, B, B. Okay, whoa, lots of B's there. So that means that shark number 1, bamboo shark. Shark number 2, spiny dogfish shark. That means that the second fin of the first shark and, oh my gosh, the first and the second fin of the second shark all have something in common. And if I had to guess what it is, it would be swirl. Is that right?
They have the same magnitude of this swirl, but they have less swirl than the first fin of the bamboo. Does that make sense? Because this is actually higher on the strength of that swirl than this one's. But you're doing great. I mean, you're interpreting this graph. So just like have to also keep in mind that we're always looking at the variable that's plotted here. So we have to also move up and down on this axis. But that's awesome.
Wow.
Great.
When whoever created this chart, this diagram, they squoze the sponge. They just wrung the sponge and packed so much information in one little rectangle. I don't know how they did that. That's pretty cool.
Well, I can tell you how you did it. You do it. You actually write a lot of, run a lot of stats. You actually do a lot of analysis, and then you have really large spreadsheets, and then you just plot them in the best way that you can to actually have a good comparison, right? So the idea of having a lot of information here is so that visually you can see the meat of the paper in this one graph.
Right. And may I ask one more question? Because I'm just curious. Is this like an established shark person way of describing stuff? Like, is this like a time-honored diagram that all kinds of scientists have used for forever? Or did you make this up? Like, did you make this chart, this diagram?
So you always have to choose the best way to represent your data. So data visualization, you have to actually find the best way to represent what you're showing. So I decided, I and my co-authors, we decided the best way to show. So traditionally, we actually thought that sharks didn't really use their dorsal fins for propulsion. So it was actually kind of interesting to find in this paper that they actually are important for propulsion. And the only one that's not is actually the first dorsal fin of the spiny dogfish, right? So we always assumed that they were like these stable keels, mostly because there was this researcher back in the early 1900s that actually put a wooden shark in a wind tunnel. And if it's wooden, there's no flexibility, there's no movement, right? And so that was what we knew. So we wanted to have a graph that would actually show us that. And then this is also a great time to actually wrap up and like kind of like summarize what we just found in terms of these two sharks. So basically, we found that the bamboo shark has two fins that act as thrusters or propellers, okay? They're actually going to beat and produce vorticity behind them and also accelerate the flow so they can then move themselves forward. And what we also found is that there's a lot of vorticity on this first bamboo fin. And this actually kind of hits the second fin at sweet spot. So they're actually getting like a ride. The second fin is getting a ride from the first fin, okay? So that's like the interaction between the first and the second dorsal fin. And then in the spiny dogfish that lives more in open waters, it is more torpedo shaped. So it has more balance issues. So having that fin as a keel is going to actually help him to keep its stability, okay? So the first dorsal fin is working as a stabilizer, while the second dorsal fin that this shark doesn't have, but this one does, and hammerhead, it's going to be producing some thrust that can be added to the tail potentially, okay? So in a nutshell, this is actually what's happening in these two sharks. And we just dissected a huge paper with a lot of graphs. And is it more manageable now, Ren?
Yeah. Yes, it absolutely is. Thank you so much. I mean, let me just remind you folks, I couldn't even make it through the first paragraph without, you know, a couple of Advil. But I feel so much better now. Thank you. How do you feel, Christine?
Oh my gosh, I feel great. I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for going through this in such an approachable way. That was super helpful. I feel like I've learned so much already, even though I got a few of the questions wrong. And I've got a little bit of a ways before I can catch up to you, Anabela, but I definitely feel more comfortable with the material. All right. So now we're going to give the audience a chance to step up and demonstrate their shark knowledge. But before that, I'd like to remind you all that Taste of Science is a nonprofit, and we rely on science lovers just like you to keep programs just like this running. If you can go to tasteofscience.org and hit donate, we would be much obliged. Also, since this is our first attempt at Peers and Pubs, we'd also really, really appreciate it if you could fill in the survey that we'll be linking in the chat in Zoom and Facebook right now. And with that, let's get to our trivia. So get your second devices going. We're going to turn it back over to Anabela, and let's see what we can do.
So Christina, can you, and Ren, can you actually see the this Quizlet, this joinmyquiz.com? That's the link you're going to enter on your device. You can do it from a phone, a tablet, also the browser. You just might have to like open a different another tablet, share your screen, and then you're going to enter this game code. And I think they're also putting it on the chat. So, and your name is going to actually appear here. So as soon as people start appearing, I can actually press start, and then we can get started with the questions. If I press start before you have time to answer it, then you'll have a chance to edit afterwards. So how's it going for you, Christina?
I think I'm in. Oh, there I am. I see myself on the screen.
Was it easy?
Yes.
I see Lucille is in. That's exciting. Hi, Lucille. Walrus. Ooh, that's a cool name. Wow. Sally. Ooh, fun. This is going to be fun. All kinds of people.
And I also want to mention before we get to actually taking the quiz that the first 3 people who get their answers completely correct are actually going to be able to get a prize from this. So like there's an incentive here.
That's cool. I didn't know that. Ooh.
So, should I start and then the stragglers can come in and join us later, or should we wait a couple more minutes, Christina? What do you think?
I think we can go ahead and start.
All right.
All right. Countdown.
Christina, if you want us to answer some of the questions while people answer the quiz.
Yeah, sure, go for it. Because I got one wrong.
No, I meant like if you want to, if there's the audience is sending us questions and you want to like.
Oh, yeah. Let's move on to the Q&A. Absolutely. Perfect. But oh my gosh, look at that. We have our leaderboard right here. All right, awesome. Great job, everybody. Okay, let's switch over to our Q&A. Annabella, our audience has been super busy asking questions. So are you ready to answer them?
Yes, let's do this.
All right. So our first question comes from Mike over on Zoom, and they were wondering what the red in front of the, or above the 0 on the video for the spiny dogfish swimming was. So in the video, there was something red.
Oh, I was just labeling the fin. So that red was just to show the first dorsal fin and then the second dorsal fin. So it was just, I had outlined the fin and put the red. So there was no information about that. It was just to visually orient you with the red and the blue. So I think that answers that question. And maybe they even figured it out as we went, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think that one probably came in pretty early for sure. Okay, so we've got another question. This is from Jonathan on Zoom. And they want to know, how do you get the shark in and out of the tank? Oh my gosh, that's a great question.
So we normally use a tub. So we go into the tank that the sharks are being held at, and we, with a net, we scoop them in a tub with water, and then we transport with the tub, and then we either dump the tub in the float tank, or we actually scoop them up and put it in the float tank. They're normally okay, because they're basically being moved from water to water, right? So they see the float tank as another tank, so they're not very disturbed. But you know, I mean, sometimes they have a lot of character, so they have a lot of power too. If you ever fish for sharks, you know that on the rod and reel they'll go like this. So they can actually, if they're upset for something, they can actually put up a fight. And then there's water splattering everywhere, but we can handle it.
Does it get slippery in there? What kind of floor do you have? I imagine any slippery or any floor that gets wet is going to be slippery.
Yeah, so normally wet labs tend to have a treatment on the floor so that it's not as slippery. Yeah, so that helps. But yes, I mean, I always wear like closed-toed shoes and good traction because it can be slippery.
I would definitely fall down.
Thanks, Mike and Jonathan, for your questions so far.
Yes, absolutely. All right, we've got one more. So this is from Dawn on Zoom, and they want to know, does the non-torpedo shape of the bamboo shark contribute to the fact that both fins act as thrusters?
Well, that's a really good question. And I don't think that anyone has studied that specifically. But if I had to guess, I would say that because of their non-torpedo shape, they actually don't need as much stability. Also, the fact that they live on the bottom, so they can actually use their fins to work more as paddles, correct? So we don't really know, because we'd have to like change the body of the shark to kind of compare it. What we know is that torpedo sharks tend to have that keel of a fish, kill fin and as a first fin, and then the sharks that actually are more benthic, they live on the bottom, they have the ability to use their fins for propulsion. So, but that's a really good question, Dawn.
That makes a lot of sense, that it would be difficult to change the body shape of a shark in order to test that hypothesis. I didn't see where you went there. All right, we've got another one from Jonathan on Zoom. They want to know, do these sharks have individual personalities?
Yes. Yes, they do. All the sharks that I've worked with, and actually all the fish, have their own personalities, and they actually don't want to cooperate on every single, like they also have moods, right? So one day they might be very cooperative, and the other day they might not really be as into swimming or eating as the previous day. Yes, they definitely have their personalities, that's for sure.
How can you be a shark not into swimming? That's like your whole job.
I know. That's a little easy. It's a little easier to get them to swim than it is to get them to eat. That I can tell you.
Okay. That makes sense. All right, we've got another one. This is from Gabriella on Zoom, and they want to know, or they say, I recently heard of the shark that can extend its jaws outside of its mouth. Do you work with these sharks? What? Excuse me?
So all sharks have to a certain degree what's called jaw protrusion. So that means their upper jaw can actually come out a little bit, and they can actually use that to engulf prey. So that's why when you see a picture of a white shark, you see the gums, okay? When their mouth is closed, the gums are not showing. But when they actually open their mouth, their upper jaw protrudes, comes out, and that gives them an advantage to get their teeth just in the right way so they can actually chomp on their prey. So that's actually true of all the sharks. It's actually true of these sharks too. Although the bamboo shark tends to actually be more of they crush crabs. So they actually tend to actually have like teeth that don't necessarily hurt us a lot, but they work like this as a way of crushing. And so their protrusion, they have a smaller mouth, and they can also like use the folds to actually get flow into their mouth, so they can actually suction feed, so they can work a little like a vacuum and get the food into their mouth. And while the spiny dogfish uses more that jaw protrusion to grab onto the food.
I have a friend who uses suction for feeding. It's like amazing. Put a pizza in front of this guy, it's like gone in a second. Just sucks it right in. But I never see his gums. It's not part of it. I don't know.
I have a feeling that I'm that way when you put a pizza in front of me too. All right, we've got another question in from Dawn on Zoom, and they want to know, what are you investigating next, Anabela?
So that's actually really interesting. Right now I'm actually studying other fish that are not sharks, but the next project that I have on the works for sharks is actually looking to see how turbulence, so if you actually like shake the water in front of a shark, how they actually respond to that. So how, like, for example, the wake of a boat, so the propeller, or even like putting turbines in the water to generate energy, how that can affect sharks. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I think we have another question coming in. No, I think we're good. All right. Awesome.
I think there's one question from Gabriella, right?
Is there one? That was the jaws in the mouth.
Yeah, she has another one about baby shark. If it was inspired on a great white, yes. Baby shark might have had the inspiration of, like, you know, your Joe shark with a big fin as a keel and chubby. So, you know, a chubby great white, if you want to think of it. But as a cartoon, and also like the plush animals that tend to not be very anatomically correct. But that's a good question.
All right, noted. Okay, that concludes our question and answer section of this presentation. So before we move on, I just want to take a moment to congratulate Alyssa, Spiny Beagle Shark, and AP for winning the trivia portion of today's event. So if you can reach out, if you are one of those three people, reach out to our panelists, or somehow reach out to us in the chat, the people from Piers and Pubs, and we will hook you up with your prize winnings. Congratulations on your shark knowledge. All right, so now I want to pivot to just one last thing before we move along. Before you leave us, Anabela, we know that most scientists have a story about their experiences with paper publishing. So I was wondering if you had one that you could share with us.
So I also have a lot of like good stories. I don't want you guys to think about like one little story as one little anecdote as like what publishing is. So my most interactions that I get from reviewers tend to be awesome. They tend to give us amazing feedback. This paper, we got a lot of edits, but they made sense, and the paper was much better after we had the reviews from the reviewers. But when I was starting to publish my first paper, which I was working on shark fin makos as an undergraduate in Portugal, I had like done this really big study on the diet of sharks, and I had submitted this to I don't even know which journal it was. I ended up like being published on the Environmental Biology of Fishes journal. But the first time, I had one reviewer that got back to me and said like, this is the ramblings of a student. And I was like so devastated. And I'm like, I want you to understand that this can happen. You can get a reviewer that is not as nice, But don't let that stop you. Don't let anyone, a naysayer, stop you from pursuing science, okay? So even though that was my first encounter with peer reviewing, I persisted, and here I am publishing science. So, you know, a note for all of you out there that are just starting or plan on starting, that we don't bite.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that would have crushed me for sure. And I think we're all students. We're always learning. We're all learning something new every single day. And I think especially people who are interested in science, right? That's our whole thing. We're always curious, trying to learn the new next best thing. So I don't think that was very fair of them to say. All right. So now we're gonna wrap up. Unless Ren, do you have anything else that you want to add before we turn it over to the end of this presentation?
I just want to thank y'all for a fun time on a Saturday night. This was a hoot. It was great. Great.
I know this is a pretty good activity for quarantine.
Oh, you know, who better to talk to science about science students, scientists that are excited about their work, right?
Absolutely. All right, so let's finish up with one more poll. Let me see if I can get this going.
Boy.
I want to know, to our viewers at home, which of the following topics would you like to see in the Peers and Pub series most? So we've got 4 up here. Feel free, if you have other suggestions, you want to throw them in the chats, you can do that now. But we've got going to space, so astronomy. We have some stuff that we could do with designing, building, tearing down and rebuilding, engineering. What did you just call me? No, so we can do one on hearing. We can also do one on urban ecology, which would be concrete jungles and red flowers and hungry bees, right? So like,
that's a great list.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll definitely tune in for that.
Hard to choose.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone who's contributing to that right now. We're going to keep letting that run for a bit.
Thank you so much, Christina, for giving us the opportunity to share our research.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Thank you to both of you for joining us tonight. And thank you to everyone else who's out there watching for joining us as well. We really appreciate you taking your time away from your Saturday night to come hang out with us at Peers and Pubs. And you've made it to our very first event. So I don't know, I think that's pretty monumental. I was really excited about this. I'm happy to be a part of this opportunity for sure. I want to make sure that everybody knows that you can keep up with Anabela on Twitter at Anabela M. And also, Ren, what is your handle again? I forgot what it was.
I dig online learn is my Twitter, but you can also just check out renwhitaker.com. Either one.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So check out these lovely ladies in the future and see what they're up to, because you're pretty awesome people to be around, as I now know from spending this time with you. The last thing I want to suggest to our viewers at home is to go ahead and visit our social media channels. So you can find Taste of Science, our parent organization, Scientists Inc., and Peers and Pubs all over social media right now. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and obviously we're on Facebook for those of you who are watching us on Facebook Live. And the last thing I wanted to point you to is our website, which is peersinpubs.org. Peers, just the letter N, pubs.org. And with that, we look forward to seeing you again during our next Peers and Pubs series event. And I hope everybody has a great night. It was so great hanging out with you guys.
Yay. Thanks, Christina. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Enjoy.